Today I am tapping our maple trees for maple syrup, and I just thought I would show you what I do when I do that. The first thing I do is I look to see, you can see here there are holes where I've tapped it before on this tree that have healed over, but I don't want to tap in line with the same place, so I want to move around the tree here a little bit to some place where I don't see any other holes that have been previously drilled. And yet I don't want it like under a slope like that where I can't get a bucket to hang easily. So I just find a good spot and I drill. When I drill, I have to use the right size drill bit. My spigots are 17, or my taps are 7/16 inch, so I use a 7/16 inch bit, and I want to drill at a slightly upward angle so that gravity can cause the liquid to flow down, and I just drill deep enough to tap in my tap, and the taps you buy will come with instructions on how deep to drill them. So that's what I'm going to do here. Okay, so I have my hole drilled, and now I am just going to insert my tap, and I'm going to take a rubber mallet and just gently tap that into place. Once it's in, I'm ready to hang my bucket, and my bucket will hang right off of this little knob. I may have to tear some of this bark away, might get in the way, but I will just hang my bucket right over this little hook here, and that will be where my bucket hangs. Here are my buckets and lids, which I brought in and cleaned up and sprayed with a bleach solution to sanitize them and make sure everything's nice and clean. And as you can see, these have a hole we drilled. They're just buckets we got from a donut shop or something. We drill a hole in here, and that's what will fit over the tap and hang from the tree. And then the lids, we put a lid on the top because if you don't, you'll get flies and other debris, and if it rains or if it rained, but there's always little pieces of debris falling from the tree, and as soon as it starts getting in the 40s, which is when the sap is running, you'll also get flies starting to come out and get in there. So you still might get some in there. It's no big deal because you're going to boil this for hours and hours, and it will be perfectly sterile by the time it's done. But I want to go hang these up. Here's my tap. As you can see, it's already dripping as soon as I put it in. It's already over 40 degrees today. I already missed quite a few good sugaring days because I got started late this year. I've been too busy to come out and do all this. So but the next week looks really promising. Whenever it's below freezing at night and up in the 40s during the day is perfect time to get a lot of sap. So I'm going to hang this bucket. I'm just going to put this right over this. And if this bark isn't in my way, which it kind of is, I'm going to have to pull some of this bark off of here. And I will just hang this bucket. I'll tell you what, I'll hang it on a different one for now so you can see, because I want to have to tear some of that bark off. Here's one over here, which is also already dripping. And so we're just going to put this over here. You can see how that just hangs right there, and then I'll pop a lid on there, and that one's ready to collect, and I'll probably have enough sap by the end of today to start my first batch tomorrow morning. These buckets will probably be sagging by morning. Okay, now I have the bucket with the lid on it on my hanging from my tap on the tree, and I will come through and I will just pull the buckets off. I will just pour the liquid right out of that spout into another bucket that I will use for collecting, and then I'll just pop these back on here, right onto the dripping spout, and they'll keep collecting. And then I will pour them all into a big evaporator, which is just a barrel that we fill with wood and burn it with pans on top, and just basically let it boil until the water disappears and I'm left with nothing but sugar. This is a really big old maple tree. I don't know if you can see how big it is, but it will support about 4 buckets. I usually put about 4, and I only got 3 on it because I got tired of cleaning buckets, but I'm only going to put 3 on it this year. But this one will support a lot. How many buckets a tree can support depends on its diameter. This one is a very large diameter tree, and I forget what the ratio is, but you can always Google that and find out how many buckets your tree will hold. Alright, we've had a couple of good nights where it's gotten below freezing, and days when it's been up in the 40s, so the sap's been running pretty good for a couple days now. So I'm going to start taking a collection of what we have and get it started on the evaporator. One good thing about making maple syrup at this time of the year is that it's usually right after we've had some windy days and tree branches have blown down. So first thing I'll do is wander around and collect the tree branches on the ground to use in my fire, and once I've burnt up all those, then I'll go to my wood supply. I don't use our good wood. We have some old scrap wood from a variety of things that we use in there, otherwise it would just be too expensive to make maple syrup. So we just kind of keep a collection of scrap wood in one of the barns just for making maple syrup. This is our other tree that we tap that runs good for maple syrup. I did go ahead and clean up a bucket for collecting sap. It's just another one of the buckets we use that we hang from the trees. Then I take a piece of cheesecloth and just put it in a regular sewing hoop, and that just sits right on top of the bucket, and then I will pour my sap through there to filter out any bark or bugs or anything that might be in there before we even start to boil. Alright, this is where we have our evaporator, which is just an old heat oil storage drum turned on its side, hooked up to the chimney, which was already here. We bought some pipe and hooked it up to the evaporator through the chimney. My husband cut some holes for pans that we got from Gordon's, just like chafing dish pans that we put in the top. And then on the end is a door. You can buy this door kit from Menards and hook it on any 55-gallon drum or any type of metal drum that you have. And you start a fire. We load that up with wood, start a fire. I clean these pans. They're a little black around the edges. That does not come off. I have scrubbed them, soaked them in vinegar, washed them with dish soap, scraped them with putty knives, and taken a wire brush on a drill to them and bleached them. So they're very clean, even though they have some blackened stains from years past of it. So now I'm going to pour my sap into these pans and let it start boiling to start the evaporation process. So after I poured my collected sap through this cheesecloth into this bucket, I then took that top off and poured this bucket into each of my pans. So now I have sap in each of my 3 pans, and I have lit a fire inside my stove here, and I'm going to stoke that up here in a minute. I've just got a few pieces, but I will get that stoked up until it's burning all the way from one end to the other and it's nice and hot. And then close this back up. Mostly I leave it open just a little bit, because if I close it all the way, it doesn't get enough air and it'll go out. But you want it closed mostly, because if you watch, I don't know if it'll do it right now or not, I don't know if I got it fire, but if I open this door all the way, you'll see smoke starting to come up around the edges of my pans. And you don't want that, because it'll flavor, that smoke will flavor your sap. You want the smoke going up the chimney. So in order to get it up the chimney, I have to close this door, and you'll see as I close it, if you watch that smoke, it will disappear and start going up the chimney. So it's just a matter of tweaking that door however much you need to keep the fire going, but yet keep the smoke going up the chimney. And then I have some tools over here. I just use a cheap dollar store tablecloth to keep my surface area clean. I have a strainer that I'll run through there every now and then when you get little burnt black bits that fall in, and water. When my 3rd pan gets empty down there, my most shallow one and the one that's the furthest away from most of the flames, I will usually just empty it into the other 2 pans and then put some water in that. Or if you overcook your syrup, which is unlikely, but if you do, you can add some water to it to thin it back down. I use that bowl to transfer the liquid from pan to pan, and then some pot holders for anything I touch. Have to be very careful about not leaning against this when I pour the sap in. That's the one bad thing about this stove design, is it's hard to reach the pans with the heavy gallons of liquid. and not lean on the side, but the side will be very hot, and I've melted a couple coat pockets that way so far, so you gotta be very careful, you'll burn yourself on the sides of this stove. This is probably about the second most tedious part of the job of making the maple syrup, feeding the fire. First being having to clean all the equipment every year and get everything set up, but the feeding the fire is pretty much a full-time job sometimes, because you constantly have to keep it stoked and keep it regulated and carry over wood and just make sure that you've got some good flames in there so that your syrup will start to boil. I got a little smoke there. My door's probably open a little bit too much still. Let's close that up a little bit more. There we go. And that is not smoke, that's actually steam coming off the pans now. So my liquid, my sap is starting to heat up, even in down here in the third tray a little bit, which is harder to get the fire all the way back there, but it's getting warm. Pretty soon it'll start boiling and evaporating, and it will be a long time before we have syrup, but I'll just keep refilling these as the trees keep making more sap. And when it gets down to where, right now I probably have enough to make about maybe a pint of syrup with this sap. This is probably about 6 gallons. So when it gets down to where it's starting to have bubbles, tiny little bubbles in it, I'll pour it into a big stock pot and take it into the house and finish it on the stove. And I'll have some filters in there that it goes through a couple more times as well. So every now and then I see some chunks floating in my syrup, which is boiling pretty good now, and I just use this strainer to run through there and get any little chunks. And I come over here and just dump them in what I call my scum bucket, and I just do that to clean out my sap, scrape off the scum, and I just do that routinely when I check on it. Keep it clean and keep the flavor good. So this is day 2 of making the syrup, and I boiled one pan from yesterday down to about an inch worth of liquid. I've since added the liquid from today to fill that pan back up, and then you can see this, it's mixed with what I had left yesterday, so I'm just continuing to go from the same batch yesterday on into today by diluting it with the stuff from today. Here's some that is just straight from the trees today. You can see how clear that is. You can see how this one's starting to get a little brownish color to it from boiling it most of the day yesterday. So I didn't get quite as much sap as I expected to get today, but I'm going to move some of the liquid from this pan to that pan and just keep going today. I just started the fire, so you can see a little smoke coming out of there. I probably need to adjust the door a little bit, but I'm going to start working on boiling it down some more until I get down to probably about an inch in this pan again, and then I'll probably take it inside